Welcome to Understanding Communication Changes. This webinar is designed for people who are affected by dementia in some way, primarily for those who are connected to or supporting someone living with dementia, but also for individuals living with dementia themselves. This webinar will cover how dementia can affect communication and strategies for maintaining connection through these changes. For example, when verbal communication becomes more challenging and more nonverbal communication is required. Some of the information covered may not be applicable to your current situation, but may become more relevant in the future as changes progress. I want to acknowledge that some of the information that will be covered can be hard to hear and may be upsetting at first. I strongly encourage you to connect with the First Link Dementia Helpline if you might benefit from more support or information after this session. It can be reached at 1-800-936-6033. The contact information for the helpline will also be displayed at the end of the webinar. To start, it's important to lay a foundation with the concept of person-centered communication. Consider what comes to mind for you when you hear the term person-centered. The Alzheimer's Society of BC, and largely the dementia community as a whole, maintains that, regardless of the changes that happen along the dementia journey, an individual will continue to have a core of self, unique to them, that can be reached. No two individuals are exactly the same, whether they are living with a healthy brain or a brain affected by dementia. Looking at the images you see on the slide, do you think these individuals will communicate or want to be communicated with in the exact same way? To foster more success in communication, it is really important to keep in mind what you already know about someone and be prepared to continue learning what makes them unique. Consider what relationship roles someone has: spouse, parent, grandparent, sibling, friend. What did they do for work? What were their hobbies and interests? What values and beliefs have they held? How has their cultural background and life experiences shaped who they are? Think about how you might be able to use your knowledge of the person you're supporting to shape your communication. Someone living with dementia can still have important stories to tell or life lessons to share, and they can still feel strong emotional connections, even though the way they articulate or demonstrate this may change. If you are watching this recording as someone living with dementia yourself, you may like to consider what you feel would be most helpful or meaningful for those in your support network to know about you. Essentially, a person-centered philosophy recognizes that people living with dementia are individuals first and foremost, unique in the ways all individuals are. It's important to recognize that adjustments to communication will need to be made throughout the journey. This is because the diseases that cause dementia create progressive changes in the brain. The image you see here shows a representation of a healthy brain compared to a brain affected by advanced dementia. This particular image is representing advanced Alzheimer's disease caused by amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles, but all forms of dementia cause physical damage in the brain, be it from vascular or other protein changes, and many will present with similar symptoms. If you are interested in more details about the brain and dementia, I'd encourage you to take a look at the topics on understanding dementia that are available in the recorded webinars section of the Alzheimer's Society of BC's website. I want to acknowledge this can be a really hard image to look at. We don't show this to be frightening or upsetting, but to draw attention to the very real damage that is causing the symptoms you are noticing in the person you're supporting or are experiencing yourself. Unlike many other illnesses or disabilities, dementia often doesn't prompt visible indicators that someone is living with a serious health condition that's impacting their functioning. If someone needs the use of a wheelchair, for example, you have a physical, visual reminder that their abilities will be different than the abilities of someone who has full mobility, and accommodations will need to be made. Especially early on in the disease, it can be really hard to understand why certain symptoms are presenting. While brain changes in the early stages will not look as dramatic as this rendering, the presenting symptoms are a result of damage happening in the brain. Looking at the global atrophy, the shrinkage in size of the brain, and the enlarged ventricles, or the holes you see, it becomes very clear why the brain affected by dementia cannot function in the same way as the healthy brain. If there are situations where communication becomes challenging, and I will actually go further and say when there are situations that become challenging, I hope you can think back to this image and try to have patience for yourself as someone living with dementia, or for the person you are supporting. Equally as important, this patience needs to be extended to care partners too. So often, care partners are doing the best they can with emotionally and mentally difficult circumstances. If you are supporting someone living with dementia, please try to grant yourself patience as well. These situations can be hard for everyone involved. Further to a look at the overall picture of the impact dementia has on the brain, it can be helpful to think about the parts of the brain and what they do. The regions of the brain that are necessary for speech and language are primarily on the left side, in the left temporal and frontal lobe. When damage occurs in these regions, the person experiencing these changes will have difficulty with communication. In the helpful resources, you will find a link to an excellent 30-minute video by Teepa Snow, who is an occupational therapist with 40 years of clinical practice experience and one of the world's leading educators on dementia and the care that accompanies it. In this video, Teepa discusses how dementia affects language skills and uses several easy memory devices to help her audience understand these changes. To share a quick, helpful takeaway from the video, consider that language is on the left and rhythm on the right. With most dementias, people lose the left and retain the right. Zooming in a bit further, there are some key areas of the brain responsible for speech and language. Don't worry about memorizing the medical terms I'll be using. This is just to help contextualize the physical changes causing the symptoms you may be noticing. It might also be helpful to refer back to in the future, as some medical professionals may use these terms. Again, language on the left, rhythm on the right. To start the process of communication, first, sound information goes through the ears to the primary auditory area, located on both sides of the brain in the temporal lobes. Imagine them slightly above each ear. Then, information flows to the Wernicke's area, the language comprehension center of the brain. Damage in this area will cause someone difficulty understanding what is being said to them. Words can end up losing their meaning. For example, someone may hear the word fork, but not understand what a fork is. This is known as receptive aphasia, problems with language coming in. From the Wernicke's area, the comprehension center, information then flows towards the front of the brain, reaching the Broca's area. This area is responsible for speech production. People who have damage in this area will have expressive aphasia, problems with language going out. This can present as trouble formulating a response, generating speech, or using full sentences. Someone with expressive aphasia might primarily speak using nouns, verbs, or adjectives, and their speech may be slowed and slurred. For example, someone might say, walk, dog, instead of, I will take the dog for a walk. The motor cortex of the brain sends messages to our mouth and hands as we speak. Damage to this area results in difficulty articulating words or using gestures. Anomia is a type of aphasia characterized by difficulty finding the right word or mixing up the names of objects or people. Someone with anomia will often speak in generalities or use words that share something in common with the word or name that they are trying to say. For example, someone might say, "Can you pass me a fork?" and upon receiving one say, "No, a fork, a fork," because in reality what they were after was a spoon. Or someone might ask, "How is Karen doing?" leaving their conversation partner to wonder, "Who the heck is Karen and how would I know how she's doing?" when really they were asking after Kathy. Vocabulary, comprehension of speech, and speech production are all things that are handled by the left temporal and frontal lobes of the brain. And people with dementia lose the left and retain the right. A few other terms for some common symptoms associated with dementia include alexia, characterized by the brain's inability to process written letters, words, or sentences, making it difficult to read. There is also agraphia, characterized by difficulty writing. Alexia and agraphia can be particularly difficult and distressing for someone who relies on writing and reading notes to help compensate for the damage happening in the hippocampus, the short-term memory processing center of the brain. Someone living with dementia might also say or do things that others find inappropriate or offensive. This can happen when there is damage to the frontal lobe, which serves as the social filter in the brain. This region helps someone to know what is or isn't socially appropriate and what may be accepted in some contexts and not others. For example, a joke shared amongst friends may not always translate well to a joke shared with grandchildren. With damage to the frontal lobe, you may notice someone starts to swear more, develop a flat affect, joke inappropriately, or have trouble understanding humor, especially if it's very abstract. Circling back to losing the left and retaining the right, the rhythm side of the brain, this can present with some challenging symptoms. Frequent repetition of certain words or phrases can start to happen. To add to this, the words we learn not to say, like swear words, sexualized words, racial slurs, insults, these words happen to be safely stored away in the right side of the brain. So, as the left side of the brain is losing access to language, sometimes the right side of the brain jumps in and you may hear things from someone you would have never heard before. Sometimes at the society we get asked, if the social filter stops working, does that mean that they are now saying all the things that they have been holding back all this time? I hope this provides a bit of context as to why it can be a lot more complicated than just a loss of filter. Teepa Snow covers this really well in the video I recommended earlier. So, knowing what you now know, looking at this picture, what do you think this woman might be having difficulty with? She could be wondering, what is this thing? Or she may just be trying to work out whether this is a dog or a cat. Or she might be trying to recall the name. Is this Fluffy or Buddy? I hope this information helps you to make sense of some of the communication changes you've been experiencing or changes you've been noticing with the person you're supporting. There are changes that happen with dementia that go beyond using and understanding language too. Some of these changes involve the ability to pay attention or to focus on the situation and what is being communicated. The ability to remember what one wanted to say. Someone may trail off mid-sentence or lose their train of thought, forgetting what they wanted to contribute. The ability to organize information or thought processes, which can make it hard for someone to communicate effectively and efficiently. And the ability to follow along with social conversations, especially at times when there are many people talking, multiple streams of conversation going on, or ambient noise present. Now, some people watching without a diagnosis or suspected dementia might be thinking, oh, shoot, those things happen for me too. It's true that there is some age-related memory decline, and everyone can struggle with these things at times of stress or fatigue. However, when dementia is present, these changes will happen to a degree that can make it incredibly hard to follow along and participate in conversation. In fact, early in this, people can miss out of 4 words. How before you get, do you think? Now this is important, so I'll say it again. Early in this, people can miss out of 4 words. How before you get, do you think? Is what I'm saying making any sense? I imagine some people watching may have tried to play the last part of the recording again, or felt frustrated that there seems to be a glitch in the sound. Take a moment to think about the meaning of what I just said. This is where I'm glad it's a fairly short example, lest people become frustrated and give up watching. If you're still thinking about it, I'm sorry, but the conversation is now moved on, and there's even more new information to try to process. Early in this disease, people can miss 1 out of 4 words. How long before you get lost, do you think? Now this is really important, so I will say it again in full. Early in this disease, people can miss 1 out of 4 words. How long before you get lost, do you think? Recognizing this, it can be really understandable why someone might struggle to communicate and may withdraw socially or have trouble following along or enjoying the things they once did. Again, this is an invitation for patience. Patience regarding the symptoms of dementia, and patience regarding the changes in communication that need to take place. The strategies that will follow take time and practice. Communication habits and dynamics are formed over a lifetime. It would be unfair to expect yourself to change overnight. Keep trying, and please connect with the Alzheimer's Society for support. Maintaining patience is not always easy, and likely there will come times when communication goes sideways, or you end an interaction feeling disappointed, upset, frustrated, or angry. This doesn't feel good for anyone involved, and these feelings can linger past the exchange itself. In fact, for many people with dementia, they may not be able to remember the exchange, but the feelings it generated are still very real for them. Some care partners have shared that following a difficult interaction, the person they are supporting has come to them and asked if they've done something wrong, not remembering what actually happened. Someone might feel like something bad has happened, even when they can't remember what it is. A famous quote from Maya Angelou puts this so well. "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." This is such a famous quote because it holds so much truth. While Maya Angelou wasn't specifically speaking about dementia, in this case, it some ways holds even more truth. While someone's ability to express themselves changes with the progression of dementia, the feelings they have stay very real, and often these feelings hold much more weight than the words themselves do. We often hear from people living with dementia how painful it can feel to be left out of communication, especially when they are being communicated about as though they're not there. Many people, at some point in their lives, have had that burning ear experience where you hear your name mentioned in a conversation across the room. It doesn't matter what words are being said, negative, neutral, even positive. It doesn't usually feel good to be spoken about without being included. At certain points, someone with dementia might not be able to fully follow what's going on, or may not be able to articulate that they understand. But it could very well be the case that they know more than they are able to let on in that moment. Sometimes the information someone is picking up on might not even be accurate to the situation. Remember the missing words example and how easy it might be to get the details mixed up? The information someone's picking up on may not always be accurate, but the feelings involved are always real. If someone you're supporting makes a comment like, "I'm not stupid," or "I'm not a child," it may be an indication that they're feeling left out of communication. The positive side is that when you focus on the feelings rather than arguing over the facts, you can validate and reassure, and much more positive feelings can end up as the lasting impression. If you're watching this webinar as a care partner, I want to acknowledge that these changes in communication habits, especially ones that have developed over many years, can be really hard to make. And it can feel daunting to realize the strategies discussed today will largely fall on your shoulders to implement. Thinking back to the image of the two brains can help as a reminder for why this is necessarily the case. It's true that many people living with dementia want to learn more about communication changes and strategies they can use to help them cope. However, because of the damage happening in the brain, many people living with dementia will not be able to learn new strategies or be able to draw on them in times of stress or when situations become challenging. For some, the damage happening in the brain can prevent them from even seeing a need for a change in communication. There is an excellent book we often recommend called Talking to Alzheimer's by Claudia Strauss. Strauss says, communication is more than a transfer of information. It is the forming of a connection that includes heart, soul, thoughts, and feelings. This is a helpful quote to reflect on, as it suggests that communication is a key determinant of a person's dignity, self-worth, and quality of life. As such, it's important for those with a healthy brain to work on taking steps to set those living with dementia up for success. Part of doing this is recognizing that as someone's ability to understand what is being said declines, the importance of what is being communicated beyond words becomes increasingly important. Communication goes beyond just a transfer of words and becomes a powerful way to convey emotions, such as compassion, patience, and understanding. Take a moment to think about communication in this context. What are some of the ways we communicate that go beyond words? Pitch and tone of voice conveys emotion, authenticity, and compassion. Nonverbal body language, like posture, body positioning, gestures, touch, facial expressions, and eye contact, all convey their own meaning as well. These aspects of communication speak just as loudly as words do, and studies suggest often much more so. Consider, for example, if I started this webinar by saying, "Thanks for watching this webinar. I hope it provides you with some strategies you might like to try." The words themselves might not sound half bad, but would you believe a word I said? If I continued on like that, would you even still be watching? The challenge is it's often much easier to be mindful of the words we use than what our body language and tone of voice are saying. Consider the difference between, "No, I'm not angry," and "No, I'm not angry." There can be many challenging and emotionally charged situations that come up on this journey. Some of them may not go the way you'd want. Again, please try to extend the patience you try to have for the other person to yourself as well. There are opportunities to have a do-over, and don't hesitate to contact the Alzheimer's Society if you need some support. I want to highlight how important body language can be as well. Looking at the images here, think about what might be being communicated. Do you think there might be a difference in tone? It is so important to consider what feels most comfortable for the person experiencing the brain changes themselves. People have different needs for personal space. What might suggest comfort and intimacy for some could be threatening or intimidating for others. Especially if you're supporting someone who has a different cultural background to you, consider what your eye contact and gestures might be saying. These things we often don't even think about can hold very different meaning between cultures. With that foundation of how dementia can impact communication and different ways we communicate, there are some strategies that might be helpful for enhancing communication. Some of the strategies here might not be relevant to your current situation, but they may become more relevant as time goes on. Of course, to start communication, you need to first establish a connection. Start by getting the person you're wanting to communicate with's attention. For care partners, it can be helpful to approach the person you're supporting slowly and calmly, from the front. As the disease progresses, someone's visual field will decrease. Popping up beside someone can startle them, as could a voice or tap on the arm that seemingly comes out of nowhere. Regardless of whether you have a healthy brain or a brain affected by dementia, startled or alarmed is not typically a good starting point for a successful interaction. Face the person you're engaging with directly. Making eye contact can help someone know you're speaking to them, and can also give them a better opportunity to read your lips if hearing is becoming a challenge. Making eye contact can also give you some helpful information as well. See if you can pick up on any nonverbal cues they're giving. Does this seem like a good time? Could they be reacting to any nonverbal cues you might be sending? You can help set the stage for a positive interaction by assessing the environment as well. Consider things like noise levels and surrounding activity or potential distractions in an area. People living with dementia often have a very hard time filtering ambient noise and recognizing what sound it is that needs their attention. Many people using hearing aids share a similar experience, if that's a reference point for you. Distractions in the environment can also make it hard for someone to maintain attention on the exchange at hand. A good example of an area that is often not conducive to a person living with dementia's success is a restaurant. There's often noise from the kitchen, plates and cutlery being moved around, music playing, conversation from other tables traveling, servers rushing about and checking in, and I could probably go on. And restaurants are often a place people go to try to have a visit. Try to be mindful of the environment, and if it's not conducive to someone's success, alter it if you can, or wait till a better time. Speak at a pace that meets the person where they're currently at. For people in the early stages, they may just need clearer enunciation and a bit more time to process. For someone with more progressed dementia, they may need the pace of conversation to go so slow it feels awkward at first. Some people with dementia have shared it can be helpful to have 10 seconds to process information and formulate a response before someone jumps in with more words. 10 seconds doesn't sound like much, but if you give it a try, it often feels like way more time than we're used to giving in conversation. Consider what your tone of voice is communicating. Are the words you're using familiar to them? Just as an example, think of all the different words that can be used for washroom, something we use every day. Be mindful if whether the information you're sharing or the humor you're trying to use to communicate is too abstract. Often sarcasm or idioms, like saying, "Well, isn't that the pot calling the kettle black?" can become very hard to make sense of. Again, take your cues from the person you're supporting. No one likes to feel like they're being spoken down to. Be mindful to share only one message at a time to help someone follow along before moving forward. Often we don't even recognize how much separate information is being shared in one comment. Consider, "Can you hurry up and put your coat on? We're running late, and I still need to stop at the bank before we meet up for that walk with John and Jane." There's an indication of urgency, which can be stressful, an instruction, and then multiple pieces of information. Bank, walk, meeting with friends. Simplify as much as needed or possible, and make sure the person you're speaking with understands before you move on. Using visual prompts can also be helpful. like showing someone the coat and shoes you'd like them to put on. Give limited options to help people make a decision, or ask close-ended questions that can be answered with a yes or a no. Instead of "What would you like for lunch?" which could really be anything and requires knowing what's even available, consider asking, "Would you like leftovers or a sandwich?" Instead of "What are you going to wear to dinner?" consider asking, "Would you like to wear this sweater?" Again, give plenty of time for someone to respond. Jumping in too soon to try to rephrase or clarify can actually come across to the brain as new information it needs to process. If someone's having a hard time, you might consider repeating what you just said in the exact way as you said it before. This gives the brain another chance to try to interpret the message being shared. If that doesn't work, you might try simplifying or rephrasing. If you're not sure if someone needs help, try asking them if they understand or need more time. There will be times someone might have mixed up ideas or memories. Sometimes someone might be upset about something you were not able to solve. Remembering back to the discussion on feelings, feelings are always real, even if the details are not. If someone says, "You never listen to me anymore," you might try something like, "I don't like the feeling of being ignored either. I'm here now. What would you like to tell me?" Watch for nonverbal cues, facial expressions, and body language. Does it match their words? If not, what might they be trying to tell you? A helpful way to put this is connect, don't correct. It's not always possible to just go along with the feelings, and it's certainly not always easy. Whenever possible, try not to argue or focus too intently on the details. Usually no one comes out the winner in these arguments, and instead, both parties end up feeling upset. If someone claims, "You never tell me anything anymore," instead of insisting that you've been reminding them for the past 3 days, consider something along the lines of, "I don't like it when I feel like I'm being left out either. I want to make sure you know what's going on too. Do you have any questions you'd like me to answer?" Finally, repeat when necessary or try again later. Many circumstances can get in the way of communication, and despite everyone's best effort, sometimes you reach a dead end. It's okay to say, "This is hard for both of us. Let's try again later." You might redirect with an easier conversation or an activity conducive to what the person needs at that time, be that something calming or a way to release some energy. Adjusting to the needed changes in communication as dementia progresses is difficult, whether you are living with dementia yourself or supporting someone who is. There are some strategies, however, that can help you along the way. As much as possible, try to stay positive and patient. Practicing good self-care will help you succeed in this more often. It's natural to lose patience at times of stress, fatigue, or exhaustion. If you find you are struggling with patience, rather than criticizing yourself, try to reflect on what might be prompting this and seek support. Getting a good rest, taking breaks, and accepting help are essential for maintaining strength and resilience. Recognizing this, it's clear that self-care is not selfish. In fact, it's necessary to be able to continue on this journey with patience and compassion. Use humor when appropriate. The old saying, "If you don't laugh, you'll cry," is so true of the dementia journey. Laughing can certainly help someone through very difficult times. Humor can bring light to frustrating situations, and it can also help tighten or maintain bonds between family members, friends, and individuals living with dementia when it feels like the disease is pulling you apart. Of course, humor is not always appropriate in every circumstance. If someone is feeling depleted or upset, they may not be in a position to receive the humor well. Keep an eye out for nonverbal cues as to whether humor seems appropriate at the time. Keep in mind abstract humor can be very hard to understand, and sarcasm, if understood, can be very hurtful. No one likes to feel like the butt of a joke. Use humor as a means for bonding with the person, not about them. And try not to take things personally. This can be much easier said than done sometimes. Whenever possible, think back to the brain at the beginning of this session. It is the disease that is causing the symptoms. These situations are hard for everyone involved, and individuals are often doing the very best they can. Some people have shared that they like to give the disease causing dementia a separate name to really highlight how it is the culprit at hand during these challenging times. Thank you for tuning into this webinar. I hope it has prompted some ideas for strategies you might like to apply to communication. If you have any questions or could use any support, please do not hesitate to reach out to the First Link Dementia Helpline. Services are available in English from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday, and available in Punjabi, Cantonese, and Mandarin from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday to Friday.